Episode 7. This was the day her dad had warned her about, the day he had drilled her for. She would do what her father taught her to do: fight and never give up. Ignore the pain best you can and fight with every tool you have, whether it be wit, charm, seduction, or even a tiny sliver of wood. Anything at all. Just got to throw them off guard to get the advantage. The van started to slow down. The man glanced away from her, and she took the opportunity to push herself up onto her knees and then force herself to her feet using the van wall for balance and assistance. When he looked back at her, Jayla shoved herself off the wall with one foot and slammed her body into his, catching him off guard completely, just like father taught her. She heard his head hit the other wall of the van with a crack so loud she had probably caused him a concussion. A growl elicited from his wolf as she struggled to pull herself back onto her feet away from him, but she lost her balance and fell backwards. He was up quick and yelling, "What the fuck?" as he reached for her. She kicked him hard with both feet and felt one of her stiletto's heels sink into his flesh with a sickening sucking sound, right into his abdomen. Her foot was suddenly wet with warm liquid. His blood was running down her foot from the wound she'd inflicted on him. The scream of pain that came from him told her it had dug deep. Thank the goddess, she wore 4-inch heels all the time. Her foot and heel of her shoe were yanked from his body. The blood was running freely from his shirt. The van came to a sudden stop as he was trying to reach out and grab her again, but the sudden stopping made him fall. Jayla pulled up a knee to protect herself from his weight as he fell on top of her. She gasped he was heavy. The man pushed himself up, cursing, "Bitch, look what you did to me." He snarled at her, grabbing her with his wolfen strength with both hands around her waist and yanked her up off the floor. What the hell happened? Another man's voice came from the front of the van. "Bloody she-wolf attack me," he snapped, pain in his voice as he turned her around away from him, not wanting to risk another attack. Jayla could feel that her blouse was also now wet with his blood. There was an uncomfortable stickiness on the heel of her right foot and down into the ball of her foot as the blood pooled in her shoe. She could smell it too now that she was held tightly against him. The back of her blouse was becoming wet with his blood. His wound had yet to heal, though she doubted it would be too long before his wolf started to heal him. He had a tight grip on her now, more weary of her now than before. The door to the side of the van opened and another man appeared before her, tall and lean, all muscle. He was wearing nondescript clothing, blue jeans and a plain blue t-shirt. His dark brown eyes took in the scene, his wolf at the forefront ready to assist too. She could see the slight green glow behind the brown of his eyes. It was ready to take control if she was too much of a handful. Jayla wasn't all that big, 5'7", small of frame but fit, and right now probably looked small and fragile, useless to him. She watched him, carefully trying to assess how much trouble she was in, but trying to look defenseless and helpless at the same time. His wolf must not have thought much of her as it retreated, leaving his human counterpart to deal with her, a smile on his face. "Come here, pretty one. We're almost at your destination. Be good now." Jayla pushed herself back against the wolf, already holding onto her as though she didn't want him touching her. Shaking her head, "Don't touch me," she hissed, bracing herself to attack him. "Come now, you're too pretty to mess up." He leaned into the van to grab her. Jayla snapped her right foot up and out at him. He didn't expect it, and the heel of her stiletto landed as she had expected it to, sinking deep into his neck. His eyes went wide in shock, and he pulled himself away from her, the heel coming free. He clutched at his neck as the blood started to pour out of him. His life was ebbing away from him. She had not missed her mark. The heel of her stiletto had sliced right through his carotid artery. Nothing could save him now bar a goddess-gifted miracle. The man holding onto her swore so violently in her ear that the loudness actually hurt her ears. She was suddenly and abruptly shoved out of the van with no regard for the fact that she could not help herself or stop her fall, couldn't even brace herself for impact. She hit the gravel road outside the van face first, and all she could do was turn her face to the side. The gravel road ripped into her face, tearing at the skin all the way from her temple to her chin. The pain was excruciating. She felt more pain ripping through her shoulder and hip. Her chest was screaming as she felt her body slide along the gravel. Tears were spilling from her eyes from the pain. She could barely draw breath from the sudden impact on the ground. She lay there helpless and in too much pain to move, to try and get away. Not that she had the time. She felt herself get pulled up by her hair, off the ground. A scream ripped from her as she thought she was about to be scalped. Then her whole body was slammed up against the outside of the van, and two hands were around her neck and squeezing the life out of her. A third man had appeared and was trying to kill her. Her feet were off the ground with the force he was shoving her up and strangling her. She tried to kick him, but he was too close to do any damage. "That's my brother, you bitch. I'll kill you," he screamed at her, spittle spraying all over her face. Jayla had nothing to defend herself, still had her hands bound by silver cuffs behind her. He was using his body to block her kicking. Her lack of oxygen was quickly sapping her of strength. She had had the wind knocked out of her upon hitting the ground, and now she couldn't draw breath at all as this man was killing her, strangling her to death. Then the man was suddenly gone from her. Her body dropped to the ground. She was unable to support herself, and her knees buckled under her own weight as she landed on the ground. A fight had started not far away. She could hear it, desperate to draw breath, darkness tinging her vision again. She struggled to stay awake, to push herself up onto her feet. Her lungs burned. Her entire body ached, and pain filled her every move. Her eyes moved sluggishly to the fighting men. One seemed vaguely familiar to her. She could hear yelling, "I told you." No harm to her. "My brother is dead. She killed him," the other was yelling back. Jayla turned her head as she leaned on the van, finally drawing breath into her lungs properly. The man on the ground was indeed dead, and the one from inside the back of the van with her was sitting cradling his lifeless body. She didn't really care. Those bastards had drugged her, taken her against her will, leaving her precious babies alone and unprotected. Dragging another breath into her lungs, Jayla took the opportunity, while everyone was distracted, to turn and run from everyone, down the road, away from the van, away from the wolves.
Full story is available at novelpalace.com. Click the link in the comment section to get it free.